Hello and welcome to New Junction. Now you can see what I've got my hands on, a digital sound decoder from Hornby, and this one is the Class 67. I'm quite excited about this because I've been waiting for this since last year when I got my new DB Schenker 67. So what we're going to do now is explore how to fit it to the awaiting locomotive and then get it on the layout without any hesitation. So here we go. So what's in the box? First things first, you get your sound decoder manual. That literally goes through your CV control, the function lists, etc, etc, etc. What I tend to do with those is once I've got to grips with the chip in general, I'll put that in the 67 box and bin off the decoder box. The next thing, you quite obviously get your sound chip itself. Wobbly camera. In which case you get your speaker, your chip, and then your 8-pin chip that plugs into your board on the locomotive. There are certain screws and things in there as well for mounting purposes, which we'll come on to very soon. Another one, you get an A4 piece of paper from Hornby. They call it, it's almost an important message from Hornby. It's not instructions as such, it's more to say how you can do things, how you shouldn't do things, without actually going into detail about how to actually install the chip in the slightest. It does say if you choose to install the chip yourself, to consult various forums or online sources. Seems a bit silly, they should have just put instructions in there. Or to go to your Hornby dealer, which isn't always advisable and may incur extra cost. But that's what that is. So, let's get it out. Now, out of the packet, you see we have the 8-pin chip itself, which goes to its control board, which then also goes to the speaker. So it's very simple. Couple of screws for the speaker should you need them, in a nice little packet for you, and that's essentially it. On the piece of paper I just mentioned that Hornby give you, it does say the installation is the same as any normal DCC chip. Now, I know from research I've previously done, and videos I've seen already, that it's not quite the same, because although you literally are meant to plug in this 8-pin chip and it works, which it should, and that's absolutely fine, you've also now got to find room for this speaker. Now the reason I've picked the 67 first is because I know the components do fit in this engine. I do know, however, they don't fit in as easily as Hornby would make out. So let's have a closer look at that. And here we are with a close-up of the model body. I've previously removed the 4 screws which hold it on, so this should just pull off nice and easy. There we go. Now you can see the current 8-pin chip there, with its control board. If the new one was just these 2 parts, it would be absolutely fine, because it'd plug in and then this would sit there. The problem we have now, of course, is we have a dirty great speaker to fit in. Luckily for us, Hornby have thought of this, and this model was designed with these chips in mind. As you've probably seen out and about, they do a sound version, so there's already the space for this chip. On this model, Hornby has the space underneath in the fuel tank, so you undo that screw there and that screw there. This comes off, and there's enough room inside it to hold this speaker. Very nice. Now, first things first, before we do any cutting of any wires whatsoever, I'm going to take these 4 screws out, because I want to see if underneath this faceplate, if there's any points I can desolder these wires with a bit more ease than having to cut through. And then resolder the actual wire. I know on the Class 37 chip, the speaker is different and it just pops apart rather than having to unscrew. But there are desoldering points which make it very, very easy to take it apart without having to cut anything, which would mean you'd be able to put it back together should you have a problem for warranty, etc. So let's have a look. So there we go, the screws are out, and it just leaves the faceplate. So what I'm going to do is just remove that, put the housing down. Of course, if we turn it over, you can see that there are solder points, and again, if we're careful, we'll be able to desolder where the two wires meet, thread the wires through the loco straight up to the chip, and then resolder them onto the speaker. So it is doable. It doesn't say anywhere that you do need a soldering iron. However, it does say you need some form of modelling skill. It's a bit of a cop-out, I'll be honest with you. I'm lucky enough to have a soldering iron, and having a DCC layout, I'd imagine most people would, but it's quite feasible that you wouldn't. So there's going to be a few people with this kind of engine that will be left a touch disappointed if you can't fit one in without having to buy extra equipment. Now, a quick preparation before before I get to soldering. While my soldering iron's warming up, I'm going to attach the speaker housing to the frame. Now, as you can see, the two screw holes are there, which match the screw holes on the sides of this box. So I'm just going to place them in position and screw them in using the two screws that come in the little packet with the chip. Right, so apparently I'm not going to be doing that because the screws don't fit in the hole, as you can see. They just won't screw in. So what I'm going to have to rely on is that the metal fuel tank casing, when it sits on the loco, will just have to hold the speaker in. It's fine, it's just well, annoying again, it doesn't actually work. But where there's a will, there's a way. Now, what I'm going to try and do on camera, which is probably a bit stupid, but I want to show you, is I'm going to try and attempt to desolder this in my little studio. So, I need more than one hand. If I just touch the solder, there you go, that's number one. I did pre-warm that up, so that came off rather easily. And now the second one. Just put a bit of heat onto the weld, and it should pop off. There we go. And remove as soon as possible. Put the soldering iron in a safe place. Out the way. And then away we go. You can see now, that should be a bit cooler. That now we can attach the chip to the engine, and the speaker can go underneath, and we'll just thread these wires through without having to cut anything. Perfect. Right, so engine body back in shot, and we go top down. As ever, you line the 8-pin chip up, place it on, just like so. That goes in very nicely. Now, as normal, the top part would sit on top, but this time what we're going to do is very carefully thread the two wires that we've just desoldered through the main body to the underside, so we can reattach the speaker. So I'm going to go and do that, and you're going to join me when they're on the other side. And just like that, nice and easy, you can see that they're just pulling through very nicely. What I'm going to do is give myself as much slack as possible for the resoldering, and then we'll go from there. As you can see, what I've done is I've twisted the end of the wires just to help push it through. It wasn't really necessary, I'm sure they'd have gone through anyway, but just makes it a bit easier. And there we are, ready for the speaker to be reconnected back up. There we go, it's number 1 soldered. There we are. That's number 2 on. Once again, secure the soldering iron first. That's the priority here. And as you can see, as that's cooling off, yeah, that'll work. And what we'll do is we'll rehouse that in its speaker casing once that's cooled off, and then we'll put it all together. So first things first, the wires carefully into this box, because there's going to be nothing worse than them pulling out and the speaker not actually working. So next we'll do is we'll find all the screws. I'll put them back in, and then you'll join me when it's going on the loco. And with the power of video, the screws are back in, just like that. That's now going to sit just like that, making sure the wires clear the screw hole for when the fuel tank screws go back in. It's unfortunate it has to be loose, but I'm sure it won't affect the running, because the fuel tank is quite tight fit, and that's literally just going to go over the top with the wires tucking out the way. As with the TTS sound version, all the gaps are there for the wires in the first place, so you shouldn't have any problem threading those through quite nicely. I'm just going to pull these through, tucking it out the way, and then as we can see, the fuel tank very nicely just pops back on, and there we are. If I put these screws in place, that should hold it nicely in position. Get the main one in first. Sorry if I'm a bit off camera for you. That's the first one, and then the second one. The joy of having the plastic tray that the chip comes in is you can actually use it to store the screws while you're doing all this, because they are tiny and they will at any given opportunity run away from you. So there we go. Speakers all in. That's now solid. You can hear it rattling around, but nothing we can do. Now on the top side, you can see you've not got the most amount of slack, but you've got enough just to hold the chip in place. Now, just where it won't get in the way. Now, sometimes I cover them over, sometimes I don't. It's probably a bad habit of mine. I know if you did want to, you can use the plastic sheath it comes in, and just to put it over the top, so it doesn't catch on any of the other metal work, etc., and stop working. I tend not to do this, but it's something you can do. Saves you having any plastic waste anyway. Right, what I'm going to do is, now that's done and in place, I'm going to take this up to the layout. I'm not going to put the top on just yet, as you can see in the background, until we know it's working and tested. Once it is, we'll get the top back on and get it running. There we go. And here we are on the layout. So we've placed it on the track. I've just put the power to the track and it screamed at me, so I guess it's working, but let's turn it on and we'll find out for sure. sounds like it's working to me. What I'm going to do now is put the body back on, and I'll put it to work on the layout. And there we are, all back together. Now the chip itself literally took the length of this video to install, minus a bit of time for taking the screws in and out, as you saw. So easy peasy to do. I'd definitely recommend getting a soldering iron to do it. You could do it without one, but you are better with one. I mean, the soldering iron I used was less than £15. I didn't even have to use any solder really, because of the desoldering method I showed you. What they do, I mean, in this current climate where a new sound loco is best part of £200, even relatively second-hand ones are that sort of money, it does bring an old lease of life, a new lease of life I should say, to older models. So if you're able, you could quite easily buy a locomotive at sort of the £25 mark for an old sort of Lima tooling diesel, add a £30 chip, and away you go. You've got yourself some very affordable sound locomotives. It also brings a new lease of life to older stock that's probably sat in a box somewhere dusting away. Hardwire it to DCC using the same sort of method as previously seen in other videos, and away you go. So no, I think Hornby have got it right with these chips. I wish they'd bring them out a bit sooner, but no, it definitely it's quite a fun element to bring a voice to your favourite locos. But as usual, I've probably bored you for long enough. So what I'm going to do is leave you with a few shots of the 67. As you know, with my layout, New Junction Central doesn't have overhead wiring yet, so my 91s are being pulled by the station pilots. So I'm going to leave you with a few shots of that. But as ever, thank you for watching. Hopefully it was helpful to someone. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.